10:30.
All right, you're hearing from the sheriff there at Kern County and giving us an update as best he can. They are surveying the damage, a very systematic and detailed search. So far, they haven't found any significant or major injuries. They're getting reports of people needing medical aid. They have a backlog of calls that they are trying furiously right now to address. So they are expecting injuries. They've got no reports of any fatalities. This is different from the way things were at this time yesterday when they were talking about minor injuries, a couple of dozen calls for service. This is on an order of magnitude much larger, and the response, as you can imagine, is larger as well. There's mutual aid coming in from outside the county, different areas of the county, all over the state, coming in to Ridgecrest to help out, to make sure that there are no collapsed buildings, making sure there are no people trapped in any buildings right now. They don't have a full assessment yet. They are trying to get that, but as of now, no reports of that sort of thing having happened.
Right. The big news and the best news that he reported is that there are no fatalities that he can confirm, and he does not know anything about the earlier reports of fire at a hospital, the hospital there, so that is good. But again, you mentioned the backlog of calls. I would imagine it'd be very frustrating for them to have to get to all of these people and feel like they need to do it in a timely way and not have the resources. They have the resources, but getting out there and handling it all. He talked about the major concerns being the dam and the buildings collapse that you mentioned, and the possibility that people are trapped. But so far, there's no confirmation that any of that has happened.
All right, and a reminder while we're here, while we're talking about that, while we're listening to him responding, is that you don't want to, in the wake of an earthquake, you don't call 911 and say, hey, there was just an earthquake. They know there was just an earthquake. So you call 911 if you're hurt, if someone's life is in danger, if there's a fire or a similar sort of situation. Don't clog up the 911 phone lines. Don't clog up the phone lines period, if you can avoid it. And certainly don't do it unless there's an absolute emergency that is taking place that you can see and report. Right. Now, I guess we can talk about where.
Well, yeah, but before you get to that, and I want to hear all about that, is the fact that I just want to reiterate what Lucy Jones said earlier, that the 6.4 quake yesterday is now being considered a foreshock. So that's important to know, because we've now had 52 aftershocks since that 7.1 quake that we had at 8/19. And the possibility of having another significant quake, a magnitude 6 point, is very real.
Yeah. Now
this could be a long night.
You were in your office when this happened. You were.
I was in my office at 8:16 when that first 5.0 quake hit, and I think I was the only one in the building who felt it. I came out to the newsroom and I said, "Did you guys feel that? Am I crazy?" Which is what I think a lot of people think. Yeah. When you experience an earthquake, you're not quite sure. Is the building moving? Did I really feel that wall? Right. Shake? Or is my vertigo kicking in, which I happen to have right now? So that happened, and then as we're talking, was there a quake? We started to see social media, light up with people reporting that 5.0. And then we felt collectively, all of us in the newsroom, the 8/19, and we could really feel, we could see whatever was hanging from the ceiling shake, and we could feel the building shake. And it did feel like it went on for several seconds, 20 seconds, 25 seconds, and you go through, you're thinking, when will this stop? Is it going to stop? How long will it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You start wondering.
Is this going to be that minute-long or 2-minute-long quake?
2-minute-long quake that could erase the building that you're in.
That's right.
I was at the Dodger game. Today's my day off. I was at the Dodger game, and here it was. You had Kike Hernandez up to bat, and, the pitching continued. And all of a sudden there's kind of this roar in the crowd, kind of a hush goes over the crowd, and then people going, you hear conversations, you hear kind of a roar going. But look, 2 pitches continued to Kike Hernandez. The game continued, even though, and then it stopped for a second or two after it became very clear to the umpire that there was an earthquake. But everybody was like, looking around, is that an earthquake? Is that an earthquake? Then you see the foul poles doing this. Right. And then you know it's an earthquake. And it was like you. I was in section, where was I? We were in the left field section. Section 6, row U. So we were underneath that overhang. We were underneath the mezzanine. So I'm looking up at that, going, I hope this stops soon. Right. Because and my wife and I are looking at each other, and we got the kids with us. And what's the plan going to be? What are we going to do?
Right. Which direction?
We decided if this keeps going, if it gets worse, we're running down out to the field. Right. Because we don't want this overhang over us while this continues.
And you said that they continued to pitch. It's quite possible the pitcher didn't feel it because it really depends on where you are.
Really
I didn't feel the 6.4 yesterday. I was driving, didn't feel it at all. Had no idea until I got to my destination and everyone there was talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's,
quite a thing. So that's
really
the reason. About 2 hours ago, I was wearing something much different than this.
Thank you for coming in.
Luckily, I had this in my office to change into, but I was wearing my Dodger jersey, cheering them on, and all of a sudden this happens. So let's, quite an experience there for some 57,000 people or so who all went through that earthquake together.
Right. And I think we're going to check in with Scott Reif. He's in Air 7. Scott.
Yeah, all those scary stories. I mean, we're just so fortunate. We got airborne, I would say, 30, 40 minutes after the earthquake occurred, maybe a little bit longer than that, just before 9 o'clock. And, immediately we tried to get with the LAPD, we get with the county fire, city fire, the helicopters that were up. And for the most part, they were already landing. Now, we're over the west end of the valley right here. And, during the 94 earthquake, I lived in this area, and we got hit hard. And I really feel for those folks in Ridgecrest because, basically what I remember living in Chatsworth after the Northridge earthquake was 4 or 5 days without electricity and all the aftershocks, and just how nervous you get each time one hits because you just don't know if it's going to get bigger and the building's going to collapse on you at night when you're sleeping in the dark because you have no electricity. Phone service was out. So I really feel for those folks out there. Unfortunately, we just can't get up there in the dark to get a good look of what type of damage they're looking at. But fortunately, what we can tell you, as we've seen, we've flown around Los Angeles, down towards a portion of Orange County, up into Santa Clarita, and now we're in the valley. We've seen no damage. So certainly fantastic news as far as this area is concerned. City Fire, their helicopters, and LA County Fire, they all landed. They did get out. They checked a lot of freeway overcrossings just as precautions, and so far no reports of any damage or injuries. So certainly I know I was at home, and the dogs were aware of it. They certainly were a little frightened. Of course, my wife and my daughter were after it happened, and we live in the West Valley, and we felt it pretty good. So I can only imagine, though, Mark, at the game, when you're underneath maybe, one of those aisles and all of a sudden it starts shaking, I mean, that's got to be frightening, just starting to decide, when am I going to run? Yeah,
you kind of have to make a decision. And we had, so not to get too detailed, but our daughter has two of her friends with us. So we had three 7-year-old girls and our son who's 3. And we're all, we're trying to figure out, all right, who's going to grab who? How are we going to get them down to the field quickly with all these other people if it looks like this thing's going to, if it starts getting worse?
And you feel a bigger sense of responsibility when you have someone else's children with you.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And a frightening aspect of that is, if it just would have went on a little bit longer, it wouldn't have been a big enough earthquake to cause damage and harm you. But once panic sets in, if everybody would have started to run, you would have had people injured just trying to get out. So fortunately, we didn't have that because you start to look at those things, and exponentially it would just take off. And once panic sets in, people are going to get hurt.
And thank goodness that didn't happen. The quake was also felt in Playa Vista. A friend texted me that they were watching Spider-Man, and it was about 15 seconds. They sat through the first 15 seconds, and then at that point, the entire theater got up very orderly and walked out of the theater. Yes. And got tickets to return to see the movie another time, so that's good. But I want to share this also. They have felt this quake in Scottsdale, Arizona. The shaking wasn't significant, reportedly, but it's noteworthy that this 7.1 quake was felt 450 miles away in Arizona, and it was felt in Mammoth as well. This quake has touched many, many, many people.
Right, and we're getting information now from DWP. The power is out in Encino, has been out in part of Encino Valley Glen area, affecting about 1,000 customers. Crews assessing those areas. They believe it's related to the quake, not confirmed as yet. They're assessing. They're going to know more in the morning, but they're cautioned that it's a caution that is universal. Whenever there's an earthquake, whenever there's a down power line for whatever reason, stay away from it. Don't go near it. Assume that any downed line is a power line and that it is charged. Stay away from it. Keep everybody away from it and report it.
Right. And some positive news. LA City Fire was on emergency mode earlier. They looked through the city and they say that they're back to normal operations. No major infrastructure damage in the city of Los Angeles. So that is at least some positive news. And then I believe we have some video of a house fire. This is in Ridgecrest. Reportedly, this fire started when there was a gas line rupture. That has not been confirmed, but that's what they believe happened here. Look at these picture here. That's very unsettling. Yeah.
Right. So, and this is kind of a mirror image of what happened yesterday in Ridgecrest, where a fire broke out in someone's garage. They were able to save that house, although there were two vintage vehicles, two classic cars that were in there. But let's hear from someone here regarding this fire.
What did you feel? Describe for me what you felt.
The earthquake was bouncing. It knocked my toolbox over. I came outside, walked around a corner, and that thing was 100 foot high. Flames. Just like that. Bam. Ain't no mercy on that one. My friend just called me. You can see it from 3 miles away. You can see it.
Describe for me that moment when you first felt it.
Oh, the earthquake? Boy, that's scary because it knocked my TV over this time and my toolbox. I just put everything away. It was big. It's never a big one.
Much bigger than the one a couple days ago.
But not as long. I think it's shorter.
It's interesting. He said shorter. I've heard from several people that today's felt longer. But
it depends really on where you are, how the earthquake is propagating through the earth that you're standing on. It really does strike in different ways in different places. If there's a lot of sediment, for example, in the earth that you're standing on, say it's a dry lake bed or an area that used to have a lot of sand, it's got a lot of sand underneath it, and not solid like clay, it feels different than if you're standing on rock or on a mountain or on a hillside. It just kind of depends on where you are.
Absolutely. Okay, Jory Rand is standing by. I believe he is still in Valencia. Is that correct, Jory? What can you tell us?
Yeah, Valencia Town Center. Earlier, we talked to some folks who really didn't think it was a big deal. We spoke to several people who were inside the movie theater here at Valencia Town Center at the time. Some people evacuated, some people did not. We are here with Sonia, who is among those who did evacuate the theater. Tell us what happened.
Well, they were sitting, getting ready to see them.
The probability of a magnitude 6 in the next week is over 50%, something probably around 60%. And a very preliminary estimate, a probability of a 7 might be as high as 11%. So all of that saying we're having a very robust sequence, not a surprise. It's going to continue. There's no reason to think that it's going to be stopping. So far in the last couple of hours, we recorded 2 magnitude 5s, 16 magnitude 4s, and over 50 magnitude 3s just in the last 2 hours. It does seem to be dying down a bit. You know, that first hour we were seeing a lot of stuff. The ground is moving enough that we're not seeing the smaller earthquakes at this point. We really aren't seeing anything below magnitude 3 just because the ground's moving enough from the 4s and 5s that you can't see below that.
The telemetry's eating that up.
Right, exactly. It's eating that up. And it's
100% that you're going to have this sequence ongoing for the next.
Well, we have never seen a sequence like this suddenly stop, right? So the aftershocks will continue. It's following a pretty traditional pattern, but on the high side. So if you know, how many aftershocks will you get to a 7? Some of them have just a small number. Some of them have a lot. We're on the upper 50 percentile. And this is definitely a robust sequence, but it's far from unprecedented. It's just on the high side of average.
And Lucy, can you discuss the aftershocks again, the size of them and how many you've had?
Okay, so far we've recorded 2 that are above magnitude 5, 16 above magnitude 4, and over 50 that are above magnitude 3.
And the chances of another 7+ in your mind?
There's an estimate, a very preliminary estimate right now of about 10%. About a 1 in 10 chance that we could have another 7 within the sequence. That's calculated for the next week.
And what about the 6 and the 5, please? What about the 6 and 5?
Okay, so the chance of something bigger than 6 is actually a bit over 50%. About 1 in 2, a little better than 1 in 50-50 chance, and the chance for 5s is approaching certainty. It's it would be extremely unusual if we didn't have another 5.
And that's typically within like 3 days, right? 3 days.
These estimates are all for a week.
A week.
All right, so the most likely time is right now.
Okay.
The other thing to remember, the way they die off with time, and we were seeing it after the 6, and it seems to be, we seem to be getting into the die-off period here on the 7. Whatever number you have in the first 24 hours, the next 24 hours will have about half that many. And the next 24 hours will have about a third that many, etc. So the 10th day will have 1/10 as many as we have on the first day. And what that means is it will go down pretty quickly, and then we'll have a really long tail where it will continue to have the risk for quite a while. The last time we've had earthquakes of this size, we were seeing significant aftershocks for more than a year, for several years.
And these are still to the northwest as well.
So far, everything we're seeing, we do seem to be having some, continued activity on the southwest striking part of that, the L-shaped, but the majority are up to the north.
So can you describe, Dr. Graves, the color coordination there? Obviously, the large blue one is the main shock.
Right. Yeah. So the colors that are on the reds are the most recent events, and so you can see that.
When you say recent,
well,
1 hour.
Yeah, within the last hour. So those we would say are all associated with the magnitude 7.1. Those are aftershocks, and they're spread out a bit, but you do see this cluster up to the very northwest. We would speculate that's where the rupture may have stopped, but we can't confirm that until we actually have some more data and have people get the reports back from people in the field.
You said you have geologists on the ground there. Are they reporting back to you at this point?
No, we have not been able to get communication. It's going to be difficult actually to get out there because it is on the naval weapons station.
And it's dark.
And
there's unexploded ordnance.
Yeah. So, there's some logistical challenges there. Obviously, too, these people were right at ground zero for a major earthquake.
Have we spoken with them at all since the
event?
Yeah,
so I have had communications. Our geologists and engineers are okay, but it's nighttime. There may be issues driving around on roads. There may be structures that are damaged. We have some unconfirmed reports of gas fires in the city of Ridgecrest and so forth. So there's a lot of other stuff to deal with that's much more important than trying to get out on and look at the fault.
But restating what you said earlier, that it's trending away from Southern California.
Yes, and I think it's worth reminding, because we're talking about the probabilities, we're talking about triggered earthquakes. It's important to remind people, mostly you trigger the earthquakes right where you had the first one. The ability to trigger dies off very rapidly with distance. There's some possibility, out for a few times the fault length. So we don't usually, we haven't seen triggered earthquakes more than about 3 to 4 times the length of the fault that moved in the main shock. And this looks to be about 25 miles long. So we're getting out, maybe out over 70, 80 miles. We possible to see stuff. That's the extreme of it.
And do we know what triggered this one, the 7.1?
Well, it was triggered by the 6.4. So this is an earthquake sequence. These earthquakes are related. If you go and do a calculation, what's the chance that they're independent? It's essentially 0.
And Dr. Jones,
you were calculating before, just guesstimating on the power logarithmically of a 7.1 being larger than a 6.4. Could you go over that again? How much?
I didn't go and redo the calculations, did you?
Let me do this quickly in my head. I think it's about a factor of 8 more powerful in terms of the amount of energy that is released during the earthquake. Now it's being released over a larger area
and a longer time.
And I think that's folks here in the LA region can attest to that. The ground shaking was pretty long. We would estimate that the actual rupture for this magnitude 7.1 probably took between 15 and 20 seconds, for it to rupture to start at the epicenter and then propagates out across the fault. Until we get a chance to look at the data in more detail, we can't be more certain about that.
And yesterday you said the 6.4 was about 5 seconds.
5 to 10, we got some data that showed it was a little on the slow side.
Yeah, a little longer.
And this one?
Probably about the same. Again, these are you know, the data needs to be downloaded and massaged, and it's Friday night, and so.
Doctor, one question I always find fascinating is, because I've heard you talk about it before, like, you know, as best you can tell, the information isn't in the Earth's surface in advance of an earthquake that we can go, okay, something's going to happen there. But does, you know, this is all retrospect, of course, does this help that research?
Well, we will go in and look, but I spent a couple of decades trying to find something that was different about foreshocks than other earthquakes and never found it. We will go in and look, and one thing to be said, we have more data. We have much better stations now for this sequence than we've had for any previous foreshocks that we looked at. So if there's something there, we'll try and find it, but it's not obvious.
And you talked at the top about the probability of a 7 or greater magnitude. Does that include the possibility that this could just be another foreshock? Is that possible?
Yes, included in that approximately 1 in 10 chance of a 7 or bigger. That's a 7.0, 7.1, 7.2, 3.8 coming in. Okay.
So what's your plan over the next couple of, next week or so? What are you guys like stationed here or studying this thing? Or?
He actually still has a paid job here, right?
Yeah, yeah. We are going to be working.
Okay,
Information
well,
that's coming in.
We lost the signal there for a second, but they said an aftershock is coming in. Probably about 20 seconds or so, that aftershock is going to hit Pasadena. About a 3.8, they said. 3.8 coming in. So
yes, that was the shake alert system that they're watching unfold before their eyes. And earlier we saw it when David was with me. They said that there would be a 5.7 in 26 seconds, and we watched the clock go down. And at 0, we saw the lights hanging move. It might not have been a 5.7 magnitude, but it was definitely the shake that shake alert system had notified everyone about.
Right, and people talked yesterday about the shake alert system, why it didn't alert people, and it wasn't a failure of the system. The system was calibrated for something that would be catastrophic or damaging or dangerous, reaching specifically the LA area.
Right.
And it didn't meet the parameters for that.
Right.
And this everything kind of got borne out in that way that it didn't do that.
And this is a developing system. They keep saying that they're going to learn a lot from this sequence of quakes. And so they have a lot more sensors on the ground now, hundreds of sensor stations, and they're going to have a clearer picture of how this all works. And so this robust sequence that Lucy Jones keeps calling it is going to be very educational for them and will help them develop the shake alert system even more.
All right, we're going to go over some information about this quake as we just saw kind of a blacked out area of the West Valley. Things to do after an earthquake. We're just kind of team up and talk to you about this. Check yourself for injuries. That's, of course, the first thing you got to do. Make sure you're okay.
You're going to look for and extinguish small fires if you see them, of course. And leave your gas on at the main valve unless you smell gas or think that it's leaking. We heard from someone in Ridgecrest earlier, Felicia, I believe, who said that they were hearing people yell throughout their neighborhood to turn off the gas, and they did that, although we're telling you to leave the gas on the main valve unless you smell gas.
All right, we're gonna get back to that in a second. Let's go back to that power outage. This is Encino. And through our sky map technology, you can see exactly what streets are affected, what neighborhood is affected. This is, well, obviously you see it. There it is, bordered by Moore Park Street, pretty much to the on one side, Densmore, Gloria, Lameda Street. A power outage there. You see emergency vehicles there. DWP is, we assume, knowledgeable about this and knows to respond there. And so that is one area that we know is blacked out. We don't know if it's earthquake related.
Did we hear that it was about 1,000 people? Is that correct?
We had initial reports of 1,000 people in different parts kind of scattered through the West Valley, mainly in the Valley Glen area. This is kind of more, I think, Encino, but Valley Glen kind of also is incorporated there. So that's the area that's blacked out at this point.
Okay. Not good for those folks. Okay, let's check in with Jory Rand back in Valencia. Jory?
When that press conference started, we were talking to Sonia, who was in the movie theaters tonight with 3 of her family members. She was a trooper and waited with us for a while for that press conference to play out, but security moved us, and then she had to go. We can tell you that everyone we talked to tonight was going to see Spider-Man. Some of them left the theater at the time. Some of them did not. We spoke with one young man who said a young girl behind him in the theater wound up having a panic attack in the middle of the movie. While the earthquake was still shaking, he wound up climbing over seats to help her. I believe we have some of that sound on tape if we can go to that now.
Everything just started shaking and people were like looking around and everyone just stood up, and some people with younger kids left the whole theater, like the movie theater, and like walked out. Some people flipped out and kind of had a little panic attack.
Well, we were sitting there watching the movies, and then all of a sudden I felt a little shaking, and it kept getting stronger and stronger, and I said, it's an earthquake happening. And after about 10-20 seconds, people started getting up and leaving the theater. Maybe a third or a quarter of the theater got up and left.
Okay, so that first girl that we spoke with, that we just heard from, her brother was sitting right next to her, and he's the one that heard heavy breathing. He said he has a friend who suffers from panic attacks and knew the sound of it. He turned around and asked her if she was okay.
San Andreas at some point too.
And that'll be a much different story.
San Andreas, remember that we said between the 6.4 and the 7.1 is about a factor of 8. 7.1 to 7.8 is the same difference, and it would be that much bigger. So a 7.8 on the San Andreas is going to be at least 8 times bigger than this earthquake, and of course, a lot of it be a lot closer to us. But consider this is only 10% the size of the San Andreas earthquake's a pretty big earthquake. And I don't think we should underestimate, just because we didn't get hit that badly, just how difficult it really is right now in the Owens Valley.
Going from memory, the earthquake we had, it was Easter Sunday.
Okay, Easter Sunday 2010, there was April 4th, the Elmira Kukapa earthquake, a magnitude 7.2. I haven't been including that because it wasn't in California. The rupture was completely within Mexico. So yes, we felt it, and probably a similar sort of distance. Well, it didn't feel quite as strong here. We were a little farther away. But it was not one of our fault systems. So when we're talking about earthquake rates, what's happening on the faults, I didn't include that.
Can you remind us, like you talked about yesterday, that there's no way to predict when the big one is coming, right? That this is all random.
Right. All of this is random, and it's something people don't like. On top of that random distribution, we
her signal there. We'll try to get it back. It looks like somebody probably kicked the plug. There she is.
All
Dr.
that we've
Lucy
had
Jones
a couple thousand earthquakes probably at this point. The count was about 1,500 before the 7.1 happened. Now, we've only really recorded probably 100 earthquakes since the 7.1, but that's because the ground's moving so much that we can't see the smaller ones.
On a grassroots level, we all understand what you're saying. Well, not all of it, probably. But there are some people out there who are thinking, well, maybe this takes the heat off LA County. Maybe this will relieve the pressure on what's going on more locally. Could you address that?
Okay, whenever one earthquake happens, we get a lot of questions. Does this relieve the pressure over here? Does it make this earthquake worse? What does this tell about the future? What does it mean? And the problem is, what it means is we have earthquakes. And that's really all it means. It is a random distribution. It doesn't make a big earthquake more or less likely. And what we have here in Southern California, maybe we're seeing a situation where we've had this big drought. Maybe that was random fluctuation, in which case we say, well, the long-term rate is definitely higher than what we've been having for the last 20 years, and we really need to be having more earthquakes. Or potentially there was some significance to it, in which case, one earthquake, it's hard to say that you've changed the rate. But probably, if we've gone back to a higher rate, then we're back at a higher rate. And we just really need to remember the last 20 years was not representative of what we have. We need to average out just from what geology tells us.
Yeah, and also, just as Dr. Jones said.
Okay.
All right.
We'll get the signal back, I think, but in the meantime, we can kind of, amplify what she was talking about, the random distribution. We all want to be able to figure out that there's a pattern that we can hold on to.
You can't predict it.
And you can't.
You can't predict it, no. I think we have them back.
The energy release in Loma Prieta, over time, that the shadow returns.
Well, yeah, and there's actually, when an earthquake occurs, there's a redistribution of stress. So it can relieve stress in some areas, but it can also load up or promote the possibility of another earthquake happening. And that's exactly what we saw here. The 6.4 actually promoted the chance for the 7.1 to occur. So that's when, the triggering can happen like that. Even though an earthquake, the 6.4 did release some stress, it actually promoted the subsequent one to occur.
And there's really sort of two different phenomena going on. There's what's our long-term rate of earthquakes? When are things happening? That fundamentally random distribution of which fault goes next. And then there's how one earthquake modulates that. And mostly it's happening really nearby. We have had a couple of situations, probably 3 here in California, where we've had an extremely large earthquake, and the rate of other earthquakes goes down for a while. We had it after the Kern County earthquake, we saw it after Landers and Northridge, and we saw it after the 1906 earthquake. This is, we don't have enough data, right? Only a seismologist says it, I realize that. But with the limited, with what data we have, we can hypothesize whether that's a significant pattern or whether that's happenstance. And we're still trying to understand that. But so you have your long-term rate, and then you have the earthquake triggering. How does one earthquake affect the other? What are the stress changes that happen right now? And that's, we could see yesterday that we made slip on that northwest fault easier to happen. That doesn't mean it's got to keep on moving there. And that's why we ended up giving probabilities, because sometimes it happens, most of the time it doesn't. This is one of those times that it's really...
You might get more data as a result of this.
We hope to have data that allows us to say quite a bit about more.
And you said the proximity to this one to San Andreas, it didn't increase the stress on San Andreas at all?
It's still pretty far, yeah, it's really too far away, so that this one's going to have a bit more impact because it's a bigger earthquake, but it's still far enough away that it really is, with our rule of thumb, that it's, 3 or 4 fault lengths is about as far as we ever see it. We're probably a little over 4 fault lengths away from the San Andreas. So it's closer than when we had the 6.4, but it's still not at a level that gets us to get up and jump. I'm looking at the time and the fact that it's 10 of 11, and you guys probably all have newscasts at 11 o'clock.
There is.
My suggestion was we go and do one more check for data and plan on doing a restatement at 11 where we can give you the details at that point so you can use this for your broadcasts. Okay. But let us go see what we got. Yeah.
Can I just say I love Lucy Jones. She is such an amazing resource.
Loved her since '94.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, the takeaways that are staying with me is that we have a 50% chance of a magnitude 6-point quake happening over the next week, and an 11% chance of a magnitude 7 quake happening in this next week. And we've had 50 magnitude 3 quakes. We've had 16 magnitude 4 and 2 magnitude 5 quakes since that 7.1.
And she says this is fairly typical. It's on the high side of normal, but this is a robust fault system. She talked about this yesterday as this being a robust fault system capable of producing sizable earthquakes. She was proven right, of course, again. And Miriam Hernandez has been at Caltech now for 2 days in a row, speaking with Dr. Lucy Jones and Dr. Robert Graves there. Talking to us about trying to give science to these lay people who are asking all these questions, trying to make sense of what is happening here. Miriam, what can you tell us? We're going to try to get to Miriam.
What we've been hearing about is just a lot of quake activity leading up to this 7.1 this evening. It all started with a foreshock yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning at about a 4.0 magnitude. It then went to a 2.5 a few minutes later, and then to that larger quake, a 6.4. There have been very strong aftershocks ever since. There was one early this morning, and then it was all capped off by the 7.1 this evening. evening at about 8:22. I can tell you that after that one hit, that major shock hit, they have redefined what was the foreshock and what was the major shock. So the 7.1 now, the major shock, and what happened yesterday is just considered a foreshock. They say that the fault where this happened has elongated, or they've noticed now that the movement has elongated, and it's gone closer to Independence. It's gone closer northwest of the initial shock, so further away from Ridgecrest, closer to the Naval Air Weapons Station. So not nearly as populated, thank goodness. The field teams have not gone to examine for any rupture in the earth yet. They'll wait until daylight to do that, but they don't expect tremendous damage actually along that fault. Of course, as Mark was pointing out earlier, we feel the shaking according to the composition of the soil that's beneath us. In Mexico City in 1985, that capital city shook like it was on a bowl of Jell-O because it was an old lake bed. Well, this area is near China Lake, so obviously a lot of shaking would be felt here. I'm going to be looking some of my notes. So again, talking about the probability of another quake, there could be another large one. It's a very small chance, a 5% chance, but the chance that this one would hit, this 7.1, that was also a very small chance. So there is that possibility, there is that potential that there could be another large quake. Dr. Lucy Jones made it clear, though, that this series of quakes does not impact any system in LA County. It does not increase the possibility or lessen the possibility. The same possibility exists as it was yesterday. So we are still seeing the possibility of a quake here in Los Angeles County. And of course, the San Andreas fault continues to build pressure. That is the one that practically splits the state. So it is important to just be aware of that potential. So they're looking at all the quakes here on this map over here. If you see all those dots there, that blue, do you see that one, Chris, on the right-hand side? This is the U.S. Geological Survey map. That big blue dot, that is the 7.1. The red dots are the aftershocks that have happened like within the last hour, and you can see how they're spread out, and especially those ones going northwest. A lot of those blue dots, a lot of those red dots. Dr. Jones says that these will continue to happen in the next 24 hours, but after the next 2 hours, they should be diminishing. So they won't be as frequent from this 7.1 major shock, but they still will be continuing. In fact, she says that we can expect aftershocks from this quake, from the 7.1, to last for about a year. She says that is the pattern that was established last time there was a major earthquake, 1999, and that the people there in Ridgecrest are just going to have to get used to the fact that this rumbling, these shakes, are going to be happening very frequently. We are going to get another update at about 11 o'clock. We're going to wait for that and let you know what happens here, what additional information they're able to glean from the data they are examining. For now, reporting live from Caltech, Miriam Hernandez, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
All right, Miriam Hernandez at Caltech for a second day in a row, for a second huge earthquake in Southern California. That has been kind of the focal point for people gaining information about what is a random series of events, but a very frightening series of events. Dr. Lucy Jones, again, the center of attention today, describing what happened and the scientific elements that were involved in describing and dealing with what happened. Eyewitness News at 11, about to begin right now. Let's hear from Dr. Lucy Jones.
By definition, because the 7.1 is the largest, we give it the name main shock. So yesterday or an hour ago, we were calling the 6.4 the main shock. It has now had an aftershock that's bigger than itself, and so we changed the name. And the 6.4 is now a foreshock, and that really large aftershock has become the main shock.
All right. And a magnitude 7.1 rather, quake shaking up the Southland. It was felt from the west coast to Arizona. The epicenter was near Ridgecrest, where this house caught fire moments after the quake hit.
And that earthquake made a lot of waves and pools across Southern California. We have crews spread out covering any potential damage.
Chef Jose Andres had a relief team in Ridgecrest already when this evening's quake hit. This fire in Ridgecrest, he says this is a gas explosion, which is very common after big quakes.
All right, very common and still unsettling to see. Fires a frequent result of earthquakes dating back to 1906. And then, of course, through 1994, the Northridge quake, the October 17th, 1989 quake in Loma Prieta in the Bay Area, which also interrupted a baseball game, by the way. The World Series back then between the A's and the Giants. Who could forget that? The play definitely stopped and stayed stopped that time. But what we're seeing here is a fire that resulted, we believe, from the quake. People going up and down the streets in Ridgecrest saying, shut off your gas lines. Not necessarily the right thing to do, though. Only if you smell gas, only if there is fire should you do that, because it takes a long time to get your gas restarted. It takes a technician to do that, and you could be without gas unnecessarily for a long period of time. So only if you need to do that, do you do that.
Right. Thousands of people, thousands upon thousands of people have felt this quake. We've heard from people in Playa Vista, in Westwood, in Culver City. We've heard in Glendale, obviously, here we felt it. And then as far away as Mexico. And we heard from LA City fire officials earlier. No major infrastructure damage, I should say, has been found in the city of Los Angeles. But authorities have been reporting injuries and damage from this quake. Reported, but we still don't have, we haven't seen evidence of that yet, with the exception of that fire.
Right, and so we're waiting for officials in Ridgecrest to give us more information about any potential casualties. There were casualties yesterday. They weren't major casualties, but people did suffer injuries, more the type of cuts and bruises, people walking in bare feet through broken glass in the wake of an earthquake, which can tend to happen. But what you're looking at here is video from today's quake. Look at what happened in this store in the Ridgecrest area. Clearly some structural damage there. You look at the ceiling tiles that fell out. And Dr. Lucy Jones now has been able to make some calculations. She's going to hit the podium there shortly. She, along with her colleague from the U.S. Geological Survey, will be speaking to the reporters in just a couple of minutes. They've been pretty much steadily out there, and they're trying to get as much information as they can by going back over the calculations, crunching the numbers, if you will, to make more determinations about what we're dealing with here and the likelihood of additional quakes and what the size and frequency of those additional quakes might be.
And we're going to check in with her right now, or we've been receiving so many videos of different, what the quake looked like in different places. One that I saw was the evacuation of passengers in Ontario onto the jetway. They were at the airport, and that was unsettling for those people there. We've seen chandeliers shaking, other light fixtures shaking, people reporting water splashing out of their pools and their ponds. And again, there was that question about was the 7.1 longer than the 6.4? We heard some conflicting reports, but Lucy Jones saying tonight that it was longer. It was about 10 seconds longer than the 6.4.
And they were doing the math kind of on the podium there. They figured out it was about 8 times stronger than the quake yesterday. And that really says something. This is not an arithmetic progression. It's geometrical, I believe. So let's listen to Dr. Lucy Jones.
For your patients, we want to give a bit of a summary on tonight's earthquake. Of course, we had a magnitude 7.1. It is part of the ongoing sequence that we're calling Searles Valley. So it's strongly affected both Ridgecrest and China Lake. The earthquake yesterday, the magnitude 6.4, we are now calling a foreshock because the 7.1 tonight is larger. That really is just a semantic distinction. We have a sequence of earthquakes, and we have a 4.8 aftershock that is just beginning and will be coming down here soon, but we shouldn't have any shaking. We should turn the sound off, yeah. One thing we wanted to show you, the estimate is now up to 5. Maybe we will fill it. Let's see. If this is a 5, it will be our third aftershock of magnitude 5 or greater. And we've also had I just got the total, 17 magnitude 4s and over 70 magnitude 3s since the main shock happened. And we have the aftershock going. You know, this comes out as actually 5. It will be the third one above magnitude 5. And I just felt that. Okay.
Yeah, very
slightly. We barely felt it. The one thing that we added to this was we brought up a picture. We find our first photo in from the field from USGS geologist Ben Brooks. Maybe Rob, you want to take this?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned earlier, we do have geologists in the field. So they are able to get out. This is along Highway 178. That it actually had been damaged in a different area during the magnitude 6.4. What we're looking at here is damage associated presumably with the fault offset. You can see where the road on the down the road, it has actually moved to the right. So this is the right lateral horizontal displacement that we were talking about earlier that's associated with the larger event, with a magnitude 7.1. There's about...
And the road appears to be...
Yeah, it's down towards the kind of the southeast end of this magnitude 7.1 sequence. So
closer to Trona than to Ridgecrest?
Yes, closer to Trona.
Right here.
And we suspect that the fault is actually ruptured much further to the northwest. That is the area that's on the China Lake Naval Weapons Station. So presumably they're not able to get out there tonight. But we are obviously seeing displacements that are associated with this earthquake. And what is seen here, this is about 30 centimeters.
So about 1 foot.
About a foot in total. And one thing you can notice in this is it's actually not just a single break. All right, there's a distribution across numerous fault strands. And that's what we had also seen before. This is a...
Only 3.6.
3.6.
Figure out how to turn the sound off.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So does that mean that we're looking at a surface rupture of about 25 miles in length?
Well, this is just one point.
Yeah.
And it's down towards the south. I would speculate that we will find surface rupture along to the northwest as well.
Am I incorrect in thinking that there would be more of a surface rupture closer to where the point of origin is?
No, it can be highly variable. And in fact, in a number of cases, where the epicenter is located, it actually has a smaller amount of slip.
If there's a huge variability. At the ends of the fault, you often see less than you see in the middle of the fault because, it's tapering off before it ends. And this does appear to be at the very southern end of the rupture zone.
Yeah. So hopefully they'll be able to get out maybe tomorrow or the next day and look along other sections of the rupture. But this is a pretty dramatic picture. Fortunately, they were able to actually get out there tonight. Presumably, I think these guys and gals are going to be working throughout the night to gather as much data as they can.
But we should see more of this tomorrow.
I suspect so, yes.
Yeah.
How many people are out there?
I don't have an exact count, but I would say probably 10 to 15, maybe more.
There's a few of them that have come from the USGS, but there's also geologists from the Southern California Earthquake Center, which is a consortium of all the universities. So I think we're seeing scientists from a lot of the UCs and a lot of other institutions are going to be out there because you don't get many chances when you're a field geologist to collect this sort of data.
On that note, I was in Ridgecrest until just a couple hours ago, and I ran into geologists pretty much everywhere I went, and a lot of them were there just casually because of the fact that they got to see what was happening up there. At what point do all of those people become activated and become a network of information?
Yeah, so it's actually very difficult logistically to coordinate all this. The USGS has teamed up with the California Geological Survey to take the lead on this, which is typically what's done in these type of situations. But as Lucy said, there are lots of other geologists and scientists who can help out. They are actually setting up a command or coordination center out in the field so that people know where to go. They're not stepping on each other's toes. They can use their resources as best as possible, or most efficiently as possible.
There used to be a time when it was more chaotic. We now usually try to coordinate. We have set up a clearinghouse, and we're gradually starting to, even the geologists come into the 21st century and start having apps to be able to share the information. So each earthquake, we get a little farther down that digital spectrum.
About the depth of the earthquake again, you said it was perhaps 10 miles deep. Does that define the intensity at all?
No. So that's just where it started. And as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, many times the epicenter or the hypocenter, which is the location of depth, may have a small amount of slip relative to the other parts of the fault. As the rupture propagates out across that fault, it can grow. You can get much larger displacements and much greater release of energy.
And this picture is proof that the fault ruptured all the way up to the surface.
And Lucy, you mentioned earlier that a 5+ was a certainty for the rest of the time there. Have those percentages changed at all in the last 20 minutes?
No.
Doctor, when you talk about this being a 7.1 there, what is it that we're feeling in LA, kind of roughly, as far as
the magnitude? It does not depend on location. It is a 7.1 period. There's no location adapt to that. To describe what we feel, we talk about intensity, and it looks like it was intensity 3 to 4 in the Los Angeles area, depending on exactly where you were.
For those tuning in at 11 o'clock, so the aftershock sequence is not a surprise. It's vigorous, but it's in line with what you've seen before. Not surprised with a 7.1, maybe not anticipating it, but that's also within the ballpark.
In California, Southern California would expect to have a magnitude 7 once every 15 or 20 years. The last one was 20 years ago. We would expect to have a 6 every 3 years or so, and the bigger surprise is that we've gone 20 years without a 6. This is more, think of this as a return to what California is supposed to be doing, rather than really that the last 20 years was the standard. Also, this part of California, the Owens Valley, starting from here up through to Mammoth and getting up into towards Reno, is characterized by these types of earthquakes. There have been multiple sequences with many with magnitude 7s and many large earthquakes within the sequences with these large, very active aftershock sequences. So this is far from unusual for this area.
Right, and just to point out, just to follow along with, just to follow along what Dr. Jones was saying. In 1876, we had an earthquake just to the north of here, the Owens, 1872, Owens Valley earthquake, magnitude estimated 7.5 to 8, so very large earthquake. Historically, maybe about 50 miles north of where this activity is occurring. So it's not in the historical record. This level of activity is not unprecedented.
Okay, when we talk about these probabilities of earthquakes, 5% is the generic number. That's on average over the whole area. The ability to have what you're going to be triggering, if we're seeing a lot of aftershocks, the numbers go up a bit just because when you have a lot of earthquakes, you tend to have a lot of earthquakes. This is an active sequence, therefore the chance of an aftershock that's bigger than the main shock goes up with the overall number. So this is probably, and actually this was a 7.1. A 7.0 would technically still be an aftershock. And when we give you that 1 in 10 number, it does include that possibility as well.
So anyway, I apologize. I cut you off. Do you want to? Okay.
No, that was it. That was what
I know
right
that's a road, but can you give a more specific locator of where that is?
I apologize. I don't have a geo-reference on that. It is southwest of Trona along Highway 178. And now I have received word that Caltrans has closed the highway. Obviously, they need to do repairs. So this is between Ridgecrest and Trona along Highway 178.
And how close would it be to
yeah. So as far as we can tell, right, we just have we got a message. This is just a text message from a geologist in the U.S. Geological Survey, and he said southwest of Trona on Highway 178. Rob is marking Highway 178, And so because we have that fault structure, we also can see its right lateral motion, so we're pretty sure it's on the northwest fault, not on the southwest trending fault. The southwest trending fault is left lateral.
Can you give us a brief description of what the geologists actually do when they're out there? They're obviously out there collecting data. What does that look like?
They're going out, they will take pictures and share them with us, and then they document at this particular location, and they measured it. This is about 30 centimeters of slip, which is about 1 foot total offset along this. And that's one of the important pieces that will be put together, is what's the offset as a function going down the fault.
And they actually have very sophisticated equipment where they can, 4.5, where they can actually measure in great detail. They take optical images or radar images of these structures, and then they can actually digitize that and get very precise three-dimensional view of what the deformation was like. So there's going to be a wealth of data that we'll be able to look at and get a very detailed picture of what the rupture was looking like.
What would your questions be about this?
My questions? Well, oh, wow.
Curious about that.
Yeah, so there's actually a number of questions in terms of the ground motions that are radiated from faults. As faults break to the surface like this, there's actually indications that the ground motions are lower than they might be expected from ruptures that are buried. If you remember Dr. Jones talking about the Northridge earthquake, that was a buried fault, and it was very energetic. Even though the magnitude was 6.7, it was incredibly strong shaking. This earthquake...
Portable?
Hold on, everybody. Our mics are open now, so we are dealing with this quake for right now. So that's more information. They've been able to crunch some more numbers.
To note that for the 6.4 that we had yesterday,
probability
that's also the case.
It
looks like it broke up to the surface, and the ground motions were a little bit lower than what might be expected for the average 6.4 earthquake. Now, those are just preliminary assessments, but that's very important if we can understand that and then be able to better forecast what might happen in the next earthquake.
And there's the other unusual point. It looks like, at least on the 6.4, the rupture moved down the fault a little more slowly than average. And maybe that contributes to the lower ground motions rather than breaking through. And that's, so we don't know yet for the 7.1 how fast it ruptured down the fault. And that'll help us, I think, address some of those pictures. And if we're lucky, we'll have a different rupture propagation speed between the two events, and then we can compare how the ground motions look. So that would be the type of thing.
Standing right there, would it appear to be opening up as one crack right away, or would you actually see it move?
We think you see it move.
Yeah, and there's actually kind of two different or two comparable things that happen. One is the rupture, which starts at the hypocenter and goes out across the fault, and it's going very fast.
2 miles a second.
Yeah, and so if you were standing right next to the fault, you would see something that kind of went from that horizon, zoom, over to the other horizon. The second thing that's happening is that the fault is actually moving side to side. Okay, so that rupture would go along, that's like a zipper. And then the fault would be going about a couple feet, maybe 3 feet per second, sliding by. So you would see a zip, and then the two sides of the fault you could actually see slide by. It may take 2 or 3 seconds for that to happen.
Last question. Have you ever seen these cracks big enough for a person to fall in?
Oh, no, it's not opening up.
Right. If the fault could open up, you will not have an earthquake. You slip on the fault and produce shaking, just like snapping your fingers makes the air vibrate. Try snapping your fingers with it opened up. You don't make any waves. If the fault opened, there'd be no waves coming off of it.
Yeah, there are a couple of reports where people have actually, witnessed the fault move. Very dramatic. Obviously, it's very strong shaking too. You're going to be having difficulty standing up and so forth. Anyway, so last question.
You gave an estimate of the likelihood of another quake above a 7. Do you also have an estimate of another quake happening that's greater than this 7.1?
That's just a few percent lower, because greater than 7 includes everything that's bigger It's on the order of 8 or 9%.
So the people in Ridgecrest obviously are going to be feeling this for some time, but people down here are going to be feeling some sizable aftershocks.
There's the potential, all the ones that are definitely above 5, the 5.1s, 5.2s, 5.3s, they seem to be felt if you're sitting quietly in Los Angeles. And we're pretty certain we're going to have more of that size somewhere over the next few days.
Lucy, you said the 6.4 quake and its aftershocks were on a southwestern type of motion. These are going northwestern. Would you expect the rest of the aftershocks to be in a northwestern direction?
They'll be on both structures probably.
Will you all be back here tomorrow morning?
Not me.
Okay.
Dr. Graves, thank you.
I believe there will this will be open. Somebody will be here.
Yeah.
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, in time for the next quake, right?
Yeah, they're tired. They've been working after yesterday too, so it's been a long 2 days. Now we do have some updated information from Ridgecrest. This is from the police chief there. More than 13,000 people without power right now. They did have 2 structure fires. Those have been contained. PG&E says that gas leaks are under control. They're focusing on the residential reported gas leaks, and officials were able to shut off a lot of those gas valves. They did a flyover 2 units, and they found no major road damage was seen. No additional injuries reported as of the most recent report. But we did see damage on State Route 178. Significant reports of damage there.
That's closed between Ridgecrest and Trona.
Right, and half of the road about 2 feet, higher than the other.
About a foot displacement was what we were just told, and you can expect that being that close to the epicenter.
And drivers cautioned to be careful in that area, obviously.
Right. So, yeah, that's what we're seeing now in terms of the quake damage from the Ridgecrest area where this thing was centered. Trona is the epicenter, kind of near the epicenter, and we have Eyewitness News crews making their way slowly as best they can through this damaged road to get to that area. But you heard the assessment, 2 fires, number of structures damaged, some injuries, although nothing major that we have heard yet, and definitely no fatalities that we have heard of yet. And I think by now, 3 hours later, we would have heard of something by now if people had in fact died here or there had been a major building collapse. I think we would know.
Right.
And
we have Jill, who is on the phone with us from Ridgecrest. Jill, what can you tell us about what you experienced tonight and what you're seeing around you now?
It's pretty interesting. We were at the park playing with our dog, and like we do every night, and it was weird to kind of feel the whole earth moving under your feet. We've been feeling a ton of aftershocks in the house, and so you can kind of hear it coming, and then the whole house starts shaking. We got home, and like a bookshelf had fallen over, and the TV and the microwave and the dishes had broken. But other than that, we've been really lucky. Like, we cooked dinner on the gas stove, and our electricity and swamp coolers are still working, so that's pretty awesome.
that is great news. Are you hearing anything particular about any structure or any one building or several buildings or locations where there is extensive damage or where people are in danger? Have you heard anything like that?
Nothing where people are in danger. My roommate was at a place where she said there's a fire nearby. I haven't talked to her very much, but I've been seeing kind of things on the news about that. And then the liquor store down the road got hit pretty hard at the 6.4 and then again at the 7.1. So a lot of people have been frequenting their gas station just to kind of help out there. So that's been good, but nothing major. We've been really lucky. I can't believe it because it's a 7.1, but...
Right. And what about, real quickly, what about the availability of gasoline? Because one of the things that can happen when the power goes out, for example, is the gas pumps don't work, and that could be a real problem for people who need gas to try to get around, get out, get somebody to a hospital or whatever they need to do. Are the gas stations functioning? It sounds like gas is flowing in the pipes, natural gas is flowing so you can cook. Are gas stations working, or are the other kind of things that we kind of rely on for our day-to-day lives functioning in Ridgecrest?
So far today, like driving around, they were all working, and I didn't see anything other than the house that caught on fire down the road, and then the liquor store is pretty damaged, but everyone was getting gas, like there were lines. And we've been kind of worried about that because if we need to get out, we need gas, but everything seems to be working right now. So it's pretty nuts how everything has, stood up to the earthquake.
One last question for you, Jill. Assuming you felt the one yesterday, the 6.4, and of course tonight's, we know you felt, compare the two.
Well, it was hard to say because we were inside in bed at the 6.4, and it was pretty intense, that's for sure. I felt a lot of earthquakes, but that one was pretty gnarly. And then today at the park, we were outside, and it was just totally different being outside. Like the light poles were shaking really bad, and the car was shaking pretty bad. My dog was kind of scared, he didn't know what was going on. It's hard to say. The biggest and most earthquakes I've ever felt. It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
You just kind of want it to end.
Absolutely. The biggest we've had in 20 years. Yep. Thank you, Jill. Thanks for talking with us.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Wishing you the best and your family. We have Scott Reif, we believe. Is it Scott over in Air 7 HD? This is Mid-City.
It is, Mark. It's Wilshire Boulevard, and we have a broken water main. We still have a little water percolating up, but they've shut down Wilshire at La Jolla Avenue. From what we know at this hour, we believe the broken water main occurred right about the time of the earthquake. So, we won't get that kind of information or confirmation that the earthquake may have caused this. We have so many broken water that type of confirmation this quickly. But right now, Wilshire Boulevard is shut down. It's shut down in both directions, just to the east of San Vicente. Not a traffic factor at this hour. Detours are good around it. That's not going to be an issue. What could be an issue, though, is these aren't easy to repair. If that's to get under Wilshire Boulevard and rip up the street and then really repair a major water main in this area, that could take a long time. That could go maybe even into Monday morning's commute. It's possible. Sometimes these can be pretty big projects. So you see a little water percolating up right there. They do tell us it's a broken water main. They haven't given us the size of the main at this point in time. We don't believe there's anybody in this area without water, but that's always a possibility, especially once they shut everything down. They have to sort of divert it onto another line and try and keep all the residential homes in this area and some of the businesses still with water. But the broken water main occurred from the information we have right about the time of the earthquake, so we'll be trying to get more information as time goes by if that may have caused or partially led to this. But it's the only one we've seen, so we talked about this earlier. Fortunate, we did fly around and look for folks responding or emergency crews responding. We didn't see a lot of that, but we do have this broken water main, and it could be a tough one to repair.
There was a water main break on the Miracle Mile yesterday, not too far from this one. And I wonder if those two, if one maybe led to the other. Of course, DWP can answer that question for us, and we'll be asking that question when we can get a hold of somebody. They're awfully busy right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a long night ahead of us and a long week ahead in light of what Lucy Jones was saying, that we're just, the likelihood that we will feel many more aftershocks is very real, and some very large ones, too. She said the percentage changed as they got more information, but initially they were saying 11% chance of a magnitude 7 quake happening over the next week. That's significant, and that is very unsettling. And then she said a 50 to 60% chance of a magnitude 6 quake. So I think we might all be on edge over the next few days.
We will indeed. Eileen Frere live for us now in the city of Norwalk. She has been talking with people there, how they're dealing with the quake. What is the situation? Do they have power, or is everything okay there, Eileen?
Well, at this point, Mark and Giovanna, we're outside the AMC theaters, and we talked with a number of people who were inside their movie about to start. All of a sudden, everything started moving. They felt their chairs moving. They said everybody got quiet. They started looking at each other, and people were starting to say, I think it's an earthquake, and sure enough, it was. We were also in Buena Park and Anaheim, talked to many people there who experienced the quake in Buena Park at a car dealership at Buena Park Honda. They were inside talking with customers when that quake hit. I believe we have some sound to play for you of their reaction.
It was just all of a sudden just shaking, like, is this another earthquake? Yes, it is. Okay, everybody, pretty much just get out of the building. Look over, you can see the windows like shaking. Come out here, we look at the street lights and you can see those moving back and forth, and it's just like, okay, what do you do? I haven't been in one in a long time, so that's pretty much that one.
Well, I was in a car, and I thought at first, like, the car's just kind of messed up a little bit. I'm like, wait, what is this? And I kind of got out, and I'm looking around, and there's people around me going, is that an earthquake? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's an earthquake. It was definitely a little more rolly than yesterday, Yesterday was a little more, like, it kind of jolted at first. Like, today it felt like it was just, like, rolling kind of weird.
And and it was two separate ones you felt?
There was. The first one lasted, like, I don't know, like 20 seconds, something like that, and the second one definitely was over a minute. I mean, that was... Like, it just didn't stop. Like, I'm just like sitting there like, when is this going to stop? Like, how big is this thing?
And those were some workers at Buena Park Honda where they experienced the quake. We also talked with a resident who was home when the quake hit, and he said it went on for so long, and it said it was more, like being in a boat with the waves rolling. He said he actually felt a little sick after and had to kind of get his footing to stand up, but he went and took cover along with his mother when that quake hit. Obviously lasting so long, they just didn't know, if this was the big one, so they took cover. They also stressed to us, that person we talked with, that we should all be prepared. Obviously, we say it all the time, but this really brings it home. To have water, have supplies, be ready if this were to be a catastrophic event, to be prepared in case it is the big one, that you can survive on your own. And other people stressing to us that there is CERT training. It's free in many communities. People in your neighborhood may have this training already, so that if a major event, a catastrophe happens, you know what to do. Just some things that come to mind when we have a quake of this magnitude. Reporting live from Norwalk, Eileen Frere, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
Okay, Eileen, thank you. So many of us will remember where we were when this quake hit. Some of us were at work. I was off work today. I was at the Dodger game with my family, and it was the fourth inning. Kike Hernandez at bat when things started shaking. And it was interesting that the game didn't really stop for a few seconds. While that quake was happening, people were starting to go, hey, what is this? Talking amongst themselves, kind of a shout went out among the crowd. But you saw two pitches happen, and then the umpire goes, no, wait a minute, there's an earthquake happening here. Stopped, paused the play for a second. And then what I thought was pretty, we were all kind of wondering, is this happening and is it going to get any worse? And we were sitting at the field level underneath the mezzanine level. So right above us, of course, is the overhang. And I'm watching that kind of move a little bit. And I'm a little bit, my wife and I are looking at each other. What are we going to do? Right. We're going to run out onto the field if this gets worse. What's going to happen? And you could kind of feel that vertigo.
Yes.
It was kind of a rolling motion, and you could see the foul poles moving around a little bit. Funniest part is that after the quake kind of ended, of course, the play continued. The organist got on the organ and played Carol King song, I Feel the Earth Move Under My Feet. Everybody got kind of a good laugh, but people were a little tense there for a while. Here's Dodger manager Dave Roberts talking about what he experienced.
I didn't really know what was going on. We really couldn't feel it as much on the field as the people in the upper deck. So there was a lot of commotion going on, and so I didn't really understand what was going on, but then I got word quickly what it was. So hopefully, I think the epicenter was in the same area, so hopefully people are okay, and Dodger Stadium held up.
It did, but there were some nervous people, definitely. And I, of course, had to leave because I had to come here and work and deal with the news, and I had to leave my wife and some friends of ours and our daughter and a couple of our daughter's friends, but everybody got out okay. The outcome of the game, not so great, but maybe, Rob can talk about that a little bit later.
All right, Mark, thank you. We're going to check in with our sister station in Fresno and listen in.
Your mom reached out to you here about that one. Your mom's in Ireland, I assume. Yeah, family in Ireland. So, thank you so much for speaking with me. You guys be safe out there. So as you just heard, these two guys, both from Ireland, they are here visiting. They were up at Lake Tahoe. They stopped here in Ridgecrest just to get a bite to eat at the local McDonald's here when that earthquake happened.
Okay, we can't hear them too well. I do want to add that the Red Cross shelter is open in Ridgecrest, providing service to those affected by tonight's earthquake, and we're going to try to get some information and find out if people are actually using the Red Cross shelter there.
Right.
Yeah.
We were hearing that people in the city of Trona were actually trying to get out of town. They may be hampered by the fact that Highway 178 is closed. Let's get to Jory Rand. He has been out there in the Santa Clarita Valley for much of the evening, where people felt that quake strongly. He joins us now with a report. Jory?
Yeah, second day in a row, Valencia residents were able to feel a rather large earthquake tonight. Many of them were out on a Friday night at the movie theater here. It was a packed house, Spider-Man in theaters. Everyone we talked to coming out of the theater was watching that same movie. They say once the earthquake hit, everyone in the theater felt it. Oftentimes, groups would stand up, often with children in tow, and leave the theater. Many of them returned, some did not. We spoke with one young man who heard a young girl behind him having a panic attack, and he sprang into action. Take a listen.
So I had a friend in high school who was prone to panic attacks, and this girl 2 rows behind me I suddenly heard someone like breathing really hard, and I turned around and I noticed this girl having a panic attack. So I looked around, made eye contact with her, and I said, "Are you having a panic attack?" She wasn't sure, so I said, "Start counting backwards from 10," and she was in the middle of a panic attack, so she couldn't really it's kind of hard to understand what people are saying to you. So I climbed up and over the rows and put my hand on her, and I was like, "Okay, count backwards from 10 with me." And we slowly counted back from 10, taking deeper breaths in and out before each turn.
Wow, good job.
Yeah.
Was it scary for you guys, or are you kind of used to it?
It was actually pretty scary for us. We're not very used to those big earthquakes because we actually just moved here, but since it was so close, we've been having them the last couple of days, so it was actually pretty scary.
Yeah, a lot of rattled nerves here and beyond. We spoke to a group of parents who were drinking, having dinner while their daughter was in the movie theater. She texted from inside the theater and was checking on the parents, who seemed a lot calmer than the young woman was inside the theater. So kind of mixed feelings here. A lot of people feel like they've been through this before. It wasn't that strong. One woman told us she wasn't worried at all. Other people got up and left the movie theater entirely, weren't able to enjoy their night. We began our night in San Marino, about 30 miles to the southeast of where we are now, and we were inside our news truck at the time, which was rocking for a solid 15 to 20 seconds down there. We began to make our way up here. We saw video of Valencia, of a backyard pool that was losing water left and right. We spoke with another man who was at a movie theater just a short ways away here in Santa Clarita. They said that movie theater officially evacuated, took everybody out. This was done by management before letting everybody back in. Here in Valencia, that did not happen at this theater, though some people did self-evacuate. But that's the latest from here in Valencia. Jory Rand, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
Okay, Jory, thank you. We are awaiting a press conference by state officials from the office, the Office of Emergency Services, to brief us on the state response to this earthquake, this series of earthquakes that have happened over the last 24 hours. Let's listen in. Oh, he's doing mic checks right now.
Not quite ready for us.
For it.
Not quite ready for us at this point.
You can expect the state response to be robust. They are sending resources there as best they can to keep the power on, to keep the lights on. Caltrans, of course, is being called upon to fix that road, Highway 178. There was a crack in it yesterday. It's a lot worse today. As you can see, about a foot displacement of that highway. That's a key road between the city of Trona and Ridgecrest.
They're about 11 miles apart, but we're understanding that the people of Trona, at least according to a report from Leticia Juarez, she spoke to someone from there earlier, that the people in Trona really felt this very strongly and were actually trying to get away in their cars on the highway.
Yes, trying to get out of there as best they can, and hampered by the fact that the highway is pretty badly damaged, so that's going to be a top priority there. People who might need to rebuild are going to be interested in finding out what sort of disaster relief material or funding is available to them. A little bit far ahead of the game right now. At this point, it's about making sure everyone is safe, and that effort is going on. Officials there in the city of Ridgecrest, city fire, city police, county sheriffs, first responders of all stripes are there, keeping an eye on things and making sure that everyone is safe.
Until we get to that press conference from state officials, we're going to check in with Sid Garcia, who is at the Americana tonight. Sid.
You know, it was an interesting evening. We had just pulled up from Ridgecrest, and as I was putting my bag in the trunk of my car, I suddenly felt something. The light standard in the parking lot started to sway, and I thought, oh no, here we go again. So we immediately came here, me and sports producer Dejo, it's all hands on deck. Folks were telling us they felt it. Take a listen.
Remember the guy not feeling it.
While I was at the bar, we felt the rolling, and everybody paused for a second, and we're having an earthquake. I looked at my wife, and I pulled everybody because there's.
We were sitting against a brick wall, and I said, we should probably move before these bricks kill us. And he said, let's move to the center of the bar, and we did.
Yeah. You knew right away what it was.
Yeah, Mark said we should go outside.
We were actually at home, and then we start feeling shaking and everything, and then it's her first experience because she's visiting from Europe, and then it was her first experience of earthquake, so she was freaking out a bit.
What did it feel like for you?
It was just moving from side to side, and we live on the 4th floor, so I think we could feel it more than down here.
Scary.
Yeah.
We actually came across one guy tonight who said he didn't feel a thing. He didn't feel it at all as he was having dinner at the Americana with friends. Everyone we talked to tonight just rattled some nerves. Even those who've gone through several earthquakes, they were like, okay, one yesterday, one today, rattled some nerves. But you know what? Everybody we talked to checked in with family relatives to make sure they were okay. And again, I said this when we were up in Ridgecrest earlier in the day. This is a reminder. Are you ready for an earthquake? Are you ready with water, food, and supplies for at least 3 days? Because that's how much you're going to need before utilities go back on. But out here, no reports of any damage, just nerves being rattled a little bit. But everybody went on about their business. As one guy told us, guys, I got to go catch a movie. Went on as a normal Friday night. Live in Glendale, I'm Sid Garcia, ABC7 Eyewitness News. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Sid, thank you. That is the good news, is that people are able to return to their routines and entertainment to see a movie, and that is great. But some people we know watching movies earlier were disrupted, and they actually left movie theaters. So
kind of depends on your whether you've dealt with this before, what your feelings are about earthquakes. And, it was interesting. Dr. Lucy Jones yesterday was talking about how, after that 6.4, that it was, that there had been a foreshock to that, and that the main quake was a 6.4, and there was a very slim likelihood that there would be anything larger or even as big that would follow it. And I think the assumption was, okay, that was it. We're done. We're going to feel something along the size of a 6, maybe, in the next few days or weeks, which is kind of what is the typical pattern. And then, of course, this happens today. And I guess that maybe is what rattled people even more, the fact that this was not the sort of typical pattern that one sees, that the foreshock would be preceded by, 24, 30, almost 36, 30 hours or so before the main shock. That's not a fairly typical thing.
And that the 7.1 is 10 times stronger than that 6.4. And the other thing she said that was interesting is that actually we are returning to normal Southern California earthquake behavior.
Right.
We had just had a very quiet period over the last 20 years. But she said that typically Southern California has a 7.1 or something close every, did she say 5 to 10 years?
All right.
Yeah.
Scott Reif now over downtown Los Angeles. It looks beautiful on this 5th of July night, having gone through this quake. As it propagated toward L.A., it felt more like a 3 or 4 range. That's why here in L.A. it didn't feel quite as bad as it did out there in the high desert. Let's get more from Scott Reif in Air 7 HD. Scott?
Yeah, Mark and Giovanna, isn't that a beautiful shot? We've got some overcast that moved in. It didn't really look like it was going to tonight, but it formed over the Santa Monica Mountains, and thank goodness it's such a calm night here. We were certainly so very fortunate that earthquake didn't cause much in the way of damage. Now, moments ago, I want to show you video we just shot a few moments ago. We did that broken water main we talked about, and you should see the video playing here. It's on Wilshire Boulevard, about the 6300 block, right at La Jolla Avenue. So Wilshire shut down in both directions. The water main, according to the information that we have, happened right about the time of the earthquake. So it could be related, but we don't know that for certain at this point in time. But that's going to be shut down certainly for tomorrow, and it could be throughout the weekend and maybe even the next week, depending on how serious it is. They've shut it down at this point, and only a little bit of water is percolating up through there. We'll come back out to a live shot and show you downtown once again. Look at the U.S. Bank building. You see some of that fog rolling through. Would like to let you know and everybody know that in Encino, we watched the lights come back on. So the power was restored in that, 4 or 5 block area in Encino that was without power. The Dodger game is over. Unfortunately, I think they lost 3-2 to the Padres. We're able to fly over downtown now. You know, there's a TFR in place, flight restrictions when they're actually playing. So aircrafts, not even we can get permission to fly overhead. But the weather conditions right now are eerily similar to what they were when in '94, when I got airborne right after that earthquake, and the whole San Fernando Valley was black. So it's just so fortunate. We are so fortunate at this point in time that we have not seen emergency crews responding to anything that was earthquake related and nothing in the way of injuries. So, we have to be so thankful for that.
We are indeed. And, as you were flying over Staples Center, I guess we might as well break the news, shouldn't we? It's been out on social media. I think it's out.
It absolutely.
It's out. Kawhi Leonard going to the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard will be going to the Clippers. That is, I guess you could call it the sports quake tonight.
That's big.
All right, here's the state officials now.
I'm going to give you a quick overview of the situation in Kern County in the city of Ridgecrest. As you know, over the last couple of days, there have been a series of earthquakes that have occurred in the Ridgecrest area, specifically around China Lake Naval Station. And tonight, around 8:20, there was a second very large quake, magnitude 7.1. The quake did last for some time. It was felt widely throughout, most of Southern California and even as far north here as Sacramento. The shaking intensity was very significant. Looking at our algorithms run through what we call our HAZAS, our hazard analysis algorithm, the shaking intensity was at its highest level in and around China Lake and just adjacent to the town of Ridgecrest. We have significant reports of fires, structure fires, mostly as a result of gas leaks or gas line breaks. There are gas line breaks throughout the city. There are also reports of water main breaks. Power is out and communications is out to parts of the community. As well, south of Ridgecrest in San Bernardino County, in the town of Trona, a small community of about 2,000. There are reports of also some building collapse and power outages and some gas leaks there as well. We'll give you briefings from the various agencies that are represented behind me to talk about conditions on our roads and some of the other impacts. Here at the State Operations Center, we are fully activated at the highest level. Earlier tonight, Governor Newsom did talk to the White House and requested a presidential emergency declaration to support our operations here in the state and provide federal assets and what we call direct federal assistance in support of all of the mutual aid assets that we are currently providing to mostly Kern County and some to San Bernardino County. Governor Newsom activated the State Operations Center at its highest level tonight and provided really right now a significant amount of fire and rescue mutual aid from the Los Angeles, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Fresno county areas to include urban search and rescue teams, fire strike teams, firefighters, hazardous materials response units, emergency medical services, ambulance strike teams, and personnel. In fact, roughly over 100 mutual aid personnel have been dispatched in support of these various fires and the support of both Trona and the town of Ridgecrest. It's important to note that Ridgecrest and Trona are both very remotely located on the eastern side of the Sierra, and the roads have been impacted, and getting resources into the area continues to be a challenge. It is a little bit of a benefit that just 2 days ago there was a 6.4 earthquake that occurred there, and we had a number of resources already deployed in the area in support of Kern County. We were able to then turn those resources around. They had just been released shortly before the 7.1 and allowed us to have a pretty significant amount of resources available almost immediately. We have been in contact with both the mayor of the city of Ridgecrest. Both myself and Governor Newsom have talked to the mayor, talked to the police chief. We've talked to the county of Kern fire chief, and we've talked to San Bernardino County, and are coordinating here at the State Operations Center with all the state agencies, as well as those county departments, to ensure that any resources that they need are being provided. Huge priorities right now for medical support and for firefighting and for emergency power. We have been in contact with private sector utilities, both the water department, our gas and electrical utility providers, to ensure that they have enough resources to try to get water and power up and restored as fast as possible. The quake happened at roughly around 8:20 tonight, and so it got dark pretty fast, and situational awareness is sketchy because the power's out and there's not a lot of lighting. So we know that as the day breaks, we'll be able to get a better assessment of the total amount of damage. And throughout the night tonight, though, we are working to move assets and resources in place or into staging areas so that we can have those resources immediately available in the morning in those communities as necessary. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to several speakers behind me. They're going to brief on what their agencies and departments are working on, and then I'll come back and answer any questions you may have. So I'm going to first turn it over to Deputy Commissioner of the Highway Patrol, Scott Silsby.
Good evening. I'll be really brief. Just as a reminder, it's a really remote area. The good news is that it being the holiday weekend, all law enforcement and EMS had ramped up and had extra resources available, so that's very helpful. As far as CHP responsibilities, quite a few of us are out there on handling the road closures with Caltrans, and from there, our folks peel off and go check the structural integrity of overpasses and roadways with Caltrans, and so far, other than what Director Kim's going to tell you, we're hearing pretty good news. From there, their secondary mission is to assist the local law enforcement. So right now I'm hearing that the calls for service have dropped considerably, and that most of the calls are being covered pretty well. So as the director said, when daylight comes, we did have aircraft up too, but couldn't see a whole lot. So when daylight comes, we'll have a much better idea of what's needed. But the good news is the resources there are handling the situation well, and there's more resources going in the morning. So I'll be ready for any questions if you have any. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Major General David Baldwin, the Adjutant General of the California National Guard.
Thanks, Commissioner. California Military Department is mobilizing and deploying a joint task force to the impacted area that will include about 200 security forces, sustainment troops, which are logistical support, and aviation assets, including helicopters from the Army National Guard and cargo aircraft from California's Air National Guard. We've also alerted the remainder of the California Military Department So all of the California Army National Guard, the Air National Guard, and our California State Guard in the event additional resources are required. I've also spoken with officials at the Pentagon, so if we need any help from out of state, from the active component, or from any other state's National Guard, that help will be on its way. I'll be followed by Chief Tom Porter from CAL FIRE.
CAL FIRE is prepared to respond with any of the state's resources that we have and that might be needed for this. As of now, we see that fire potential is pretty low for this weekend or moderate, and so we'll be able to use some of those resources from California's fire department to meet any needs that are unmet. Also, our Office of the State Fire Marshal is working with the liquid pipe and fuel providers to ensure that their pipelines are safety through our pipeline safety program. So, I will be followed by David Kim, Secretary of Transportation Agency.
Thank you very much. I'd like to update you on the status of 3 roadways. The first is State Route 178. There is significant damage on 178 as a result of a rock slide across both lanes near Lake Isabella. There are also severe cracks in the roadway just outside the township of Trona, and this is very close to the location where cracks were discovered as a result of yesterday's event, which were repaired quickly within a few hours by Caltrans maintenance crews. There is a full closure of State Route 178 in 2 different locations. I'll read them to you. From the San Bernardino-Kern County line to 14.7 miles east of the San Bernardino-Kern County line, there is an additional full closure at 4.1 miles east of the junction at State Route 184 in Kern Canyon due to the rock slide. The cracks on 178 will be filled by Caltrans maintenance crews with cold mix asphalt. A couple of other routes that were impacted were State Route 127 and State Route 190. There were rock slides on both routes tonight. They've both been cleared and both roads are now open. And I will now be followed by Health and Human Services.
Good evening, Mark Gomich, Deputy Secretary at the California Health and Human Services Agency. We have fully activated and have deployed resources both at the Emergency Medical Services Authority, the California Department of Public Health, and the California Department of Social Services. We're in close contact with all of the healthcare facilities in the region and have been in communication with them to ensure that they have all the resources they need to take care of the patients that they have in those facilities. And we also are working with the sheltering task force here within the state operations center through our Department of Social Services. Thank you.
Before I take questions, say earlier tonight as well, we had a conversation with FEMA Region 9 Administrator. FEMA is now present here at the State Operations Center, and as a result of the governor's request to the White House, FEMA activating 2 incident management teams from Northern California in support of this operation. Right now, our big concern, obviously, is that it got dark fast, so good situational awareness of the total amount of impact is where we're really looking to get better fidelity on when the light comes up. In anticipation of a need, and in our discussions, preliminary discussions with both the police chief and the mayor, we know that there's been quite a bit of damage, and we know that there's been a lot of impact. So we are moving resources from these various agencies and departments that are represented here into staging area to get them as close as possible into the theater of operation, mainly because it is such a remote area. Really, the state is really positioning itself to ensure that, at the direction of Governor Newsom, that we have every available asset put in the right place and available to respond in whether they need it tonight to get there, but definitely at first light as resources are needed. If they're not needed, then we can scale back and redeploy them or demobilize them. The key, though, here is that this was a very large earthquake, and we also know there's going to be a series of aftershocks as a result of the main quake. So we want to prepare ourselves and being able to have those resources in place as the days go on here. This is not going to be something that's going to be over right away. We will be in 24/7 operations here at the State Operations Center in support of the counties until the situation is fully mitigated. So with that, happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Were there any injuries reported?
There have been a number of injuries reported. Don't have a total number of injuries. I don't know if I've count on injuries or fatalities. We have not had any reports of fatalities yet, but we do know that there have been injuries. There's been a significant increased number of EMS calls to the 911 centers. And in talking with the police chief, there's been requests for a strike team of ambulances, as well as the fire units that are on scene have been doing emergency medical care of individuals who may have been injured by a lot of falling debris or what I would say non-structural items falling and injuring individuals.
Can you repeat the main priorities? You mentioned medical support, firefighting, and the others.
Yeah, so our main priorities are going to be in support of the counties are continuing to protect lives and property and environment through providing mutual aid assets for fire, emergency medical services, hazardous materials. We are concerned this area does have a lot of pipelines going through it, and that we want to ensure that we have enough hazardous materials response. We'll continue to coordinate emergency response operations both for state agencies and with our federal partners in support of what the local governments need. We're going to be making sure we can get critical infrastructure back up as soon as possible. Those are the lifelines: water, power, gas service, and making sure wastewater and those kinds of things are all fully operational. We are concerned about there's a hospital that's been impacted, and there's a number of care facilities, and we want to make sure that those facilities and those individuals, those vulnerable populations, needs are met, and we want to take that into account. That'll continue to be a priority for us. And then we just want to make sure that the public continue to remain informed of what to do, and to know that there's going to be aftershocks, to prepare for those aftershocks. We suspect that individuals may not want to go back into their homes initially, so sheltering operations will continue to be a primary focus for us in support of what the local government's doing. Red Cross has already been engaged. We are providing additional support with several thousand gallons of liters of water, cots, comfort kits, sheltering supplies, and also ADA compliant bedding for individuals who may need that. And FEMA has also supported several thousand commodities as well that they're staging at Edwards Air Force Base. And we'll just continue to meet any unmet needs moving forward. So those are really going to be our continued priorities in the next 24 to 48 hours.
I know you mentioned that some people are leaving tomorrow morning. Heading over there from here. At what time is that?
So there's people that are deploying there now. We're staging them in close. So there'll be people leaving all through tonight and tomorrow, and they're coming from all over the state of California. We're deploying them. Many of them are closest resources like fire and emergency medical and search and rescue, but members of the National Guard and other state forces are being deployed from throughout the state from tonight through tomorrow, and pretty much for most of the day tomorrow until the situation is mitigated and the resources aren't needed any longer. Okay, any other questions? Okay, great. Well, we'll have another follow-up press conference in the morning around 10 or 11 tomorrow. So thank you very much.
All right. So now we know that there has been damage, and it looks like it could be significant damage throughout the area of Ridgecrest and Trona. We just heard from state officials, that there have been reports of items falling on people, a lot of ambulance calls, strike teams on the scene. Okay, now we have a news conference from Kern County officials. Let's listen in.
We had just had briefings as we came out of the field today, we being myself and Janice Hernandez from the California Geological Survey. With support from the California Highway Patrol, we were able to do aerial reconnaissance of what we call the surface fault rupture. When an earthquake happens, our sensor network picks that up, and of course we automatically locate and get that information out to everybody immediately. We also then follow that up, and in larger earthquakes like the 6.4 and now the 7.1, we also look for fault surface rupture. This is how we confirm which fault the earthquake occurred on. So we'll see a pattern of aftershocks, and we'll have a hunch about which fault that's on, but until we get eyes on it, that's when we confirm. So today we were out by air and also on the ground looking for surface fault rupture on a previously mapped fault. We did find fault surface rupture both out of the base on Highway 178, where you had seen images from last night, and then also that rupture continues from that point on Highway 178. It also continues to the northeast and to the southwest. This is a somewhat atypical type of earthquake in Southern California. We've seen these before, though. These are on what we call cross faults. So these are faults that are against the grain of the main San Andreas fault system. So the San Andreas fault is running from northwest to southeast through the state like a big diagonal cut. And then against it, perpendicular to it, are this other set of faults in some places, and we call those cross faults. So what's typical is to have your bigger earthquakes on the faults that are oriented like the San Andreas fault, that are moving right laterally. What's less typical is a cross fault rupture that's left lateral. So when the 6.4 occurred, that rupture was on a cross fault as well as a portion of the main fault, and now the 7.1 is on the main fault. We've seen that main shock is just northwest of that intersection, so we know rupture went toward the northwest. It also went toward the southeast. Our geologists have been out in the field this evening and confirmed fault surface rupture farther to the east on 178. So we know that that fault broke where we're seeing the aftershocks along it. Tomorrow we're hoping to get in the air again to do reconnaissance and look for surface faulting associated with the new main shock, the 7.1. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hudnut. Now we would like to turn our attention to the City of Ridgecrest Mayor Breeden.
Thank you all for coming. I would like to say a few words to our own citizens. Many of them have experienced something that is very traumatic, somewhat unknown to most of them, and many of them are sleeping outside tonight. I know that it is a difficult situation, but they're fearful to be in their homes, and we are offering any services. As noted earlier, we have places for people to shelter here, but many are choosing to just be with their neighbors, both in their sidewalks, in their driveways, and some of them are in the streets. We're asking everyone to drive safely, be careful, watch for these people, and understand that we are doing the very best we can. It is not an impossible task to take care of all this, but it is going to be a longer task than we thought the other day. So I thank you all for coming. I appreciate the consideration that you're going to give to the citizens of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Breeden. We also have with us today Kern County 1st District Supervisor Mick Gleeson, who will be able to speak with us as well.
Thanks. Thank you all for being here. Special thanks to the first responders, all of them that have performed so brilliantly in the past day or two. It's been a phenomenal experience to watch these guys and gals get together and work together, and with such dedication and such devotion to helping this community out. I've had a lot of conversations in the past couple of days. I've talked with the White House. I've
talked with Senator Feinstein, Senator Harris. I've talked with the governor. Everybody's fully engaged in what we're doing and understands our situation and is trying to give us as much support as they possibly can. I toured the base today in the city with Congressman McCarthy, who's fully engaged, Senator Grove, and Assemblyman Fong. So everybody's engaged, and we're all over this thing, and we're looking forward to its rapid conclusion. As soon as Mother Nature stops hounding us, I guess we'll put this to bed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Gleeson. And as he mentioned, we have representatives here as well from Senator Shannon Grove's office. We have representatives here from Bakersfield City Fire Department, Los Angeles County Fire Department. So there are many resources that are pouring in to help this community. So at this time, we'd like to go ahead and open it up to questions briefly before we go to the breakout on the one-on-ones.
What are we calling the epicenter? We were on 171 when the quake hit. We had just passed the fissure. We felt the ground move. We went about 8 miles east, and we were about 2 to the town of Trona, and the ground shook, the hills came alive. Were we on the epicenter? Where we would know where the epicenter is. We were with geologists out there. They were analyzing that first fissure, and then the ground broke where we were driving. Is that a new fault?
But in essence, where was the epicenter? Is that something that we can state officially that we know at this point? Yeah, let's go ahead and do that then.
And state your name again.
Ken Hudnut, U.S. Geological Survey. The information about the epicenters gets updated continuously. So people are checking the automated locations, and that gets updated through time. And also you notice the magnitudes bounce around just a little. So that's just normal. So the epicenter of the main shock, when I was doing this before, the 6.4 where it intersects the northwest-southeast oriented fault, the epicenter of the main shock is just about here. It's in a remote part of the base. I don't have any place name to give it a name right now. We're not going to call the name of the fault that it's on until we get eyes on that. Hopefully tomorrow we'll confirm which fault ruptured. As to information source, Caltech is the definitive Southern California seismic network operator, and U.S. Geological Survey works in partnership with them in Pasadena. The website you want is scsn.org, Southern California Seismic Network.org. Also earthquakes.usgs.gov. So those maps allow you to interact, zoom in, zoom out, put satellite imagery, topo, and you can get all the information right there.
Ken, for all the people who are going to be listening, who are out there tonight in front of their homes or in their homes, what reasonably can they expect in the way of seismic activity over the next 12 to 18 hours? What should they be expecting, anticipating, or be concerned about in that time? Please, as non-technically as possible.
I'm going to give a quick sketch of the basics, but also point you in the direction of the official USGS Aftershock forecast. If you search on that, you'll find it for details. But basically, for a 7.1, people should be expecting at least one 6.1 magnitude or higher, and at least 10 5.1 magnitude or higher. And you've been feeling them roll through. We're getting plenty. I don't know the detailed stats on how that breaks down as to how it matches up with expectation, but we'll be also adjusting the official aftershock forecast as we go through this.
Chief, if you would, based on the information that you just got from USGS, what would you advise people to do and prepare in their homes and what they're doing to get through this next period with all these shocks that probably will be coming in the next 12 to 18 hours?
Okay, so the question that has been posed is, what is the safety message for the residents of Ridgecrest? What should they be preparing to do? Rick?
Well, obviously, there are concerns. Children, small children, obviously are frightened with these, so making sure that they're safe. I would probably start taking some stuff off of the walls if it's not already down, and in high places. Make sure that you're not sleeping under something that's still hung up, and we can't forget about the pets. The pets are extremely nervous during this time frame. And then make sure that you have plenty of supplies when the stores are open and things like that. Make sure that you're stocking up just in case that we have something bigger than we had today, and it's stuff starts crumbling and these stores can't get back open. We need to make sure that and if we can't get to you right away, you have to be able to take care of yourself for a period of time. So I know that we all preach that we need to be prepared, and I know it's difficult that we always say we will, but now's the time. So prepare yourself, especially for the next, I would say, week, 2 weeks. This isn't going to stop in the near future. As we know, the Aftershocks, they haven't slowed down since the 7-1. There for a period of time, it seemed like it just kept, there was a constant vibration, so be prepared. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, Nurse and I came to LA5. We were on our way to Trona, and people told us that they had little water, that their tank was not filling up for the city, and that they only had a day worth of water for their children, for themselves. Now that road there that we were on is buckled, it's shut down. How are they going to get water, and what do they need to do or hear from you? If they, some of them don't even have power, but if they can hear you.
Okay. Actually, we had just put out on Facebook, we were currently working that issue, trying to help them. It is a different county, but they are our neighbors, and we care about them. Many of our men and women work out there, so we do care. There's a stack of water sitting over there that people have donated that we can't get to them now. So it is an issue. We can't get there, obviously. I do know that they have crews en route. I can't speak a lot about what's going on there because I don't know. I do know they have help en route, and let's hope they get the help that they need, and obviously we would provide what we can. But right now our concern is here.
Chief, I don't know if this would be best addressed to the fire chief or to the supervisor. If both of you could step forward for a minute. Do you have any kind of a clue or any kind of a timetable on when we might expect additional resources from the state of California or a supervisor from Washington, perhaps FEMA or anything else coming in here? Have you been apprised of any kind of a timeline?
So the question that has been posed is there a timeline, and what is expected to be received by way of resources from neighboring jurisdictions as well as further jurisdictions, correct?
Basically, yes.
Would you like to comment on that?
So to answer your question, sir, our chief reached out almost immediately once that 7.1 happened. So OES was already involved with that request. And we had at least strike teams coming from Region 5, Region 6, Fresno, LA County, LA City, and Orange County are all sending us USAR's task force engines. We already have people here on scene from out of county. That's currently taking place. We do have more coming. I would say within the next couple hours, we should expect mass quantities of those people being here. But we've already received outside help almost immediately. And they're already here, and they're already in the form of getting ready to complete that grid search I was talking to you about from earlier. So as far as the fire side of things and mutual aid and support from the state, we have an abundance of people coming. We currently have a lot of staffing in Ridgecrest ready, prepared, and we're just standing by waiting to address those issues.
In terms of resources, we spoke with county officials earlier today in Kern County, and they were talking about how you guys really assess when your resources are going to run out, and then that's when you guys tap into that mutual aid program. So if you can maybe just bring it for our viewers in Bakersfield right now in terms of what your resources are looking like for the people up here in Ridgecrest for the next 24 hours.
As far as the staffing levels and things like that, as I stated, so almost immediately following the 7.1, essentially our entire battalion in the desert side was engaged on that. So we had engines already engaged from that. And like I stated earlier, our chief had already made the phone calls to OES to get that started from outside resources, mutual aid. And then our department, Kern County Fire Department, has already started staffing our stations and callback procedures and like that. So already, immediately, we've had stuff already filled, backfilled, and ready for the current mission we have going on. So due to fast actions on part of our command staff, the chief, and then also our mutual aid entities behind us, we're adequately prepared. I mean, it does have to do with the fact we just had a major earthquake earlier. So we actually have resources nearby anyways as a result. So we're ready to go and staff.
It's more so food, water, the essentials that the evacuees have been talking about, getting that here for them.
Yes, that stuff has trailed in, like the chief had stated. We do already have stuff here, but as the incident is progressing, as things digress and get bigger, our primary focus right now is Ridgecrest. That's where our focus is right now, right? And then as soon as we start addressing that, we start branching out and start to identify those secondary resources that may need assistance. So as far as logistical needs as water, ice, Gator food, stuff like that, that stuff is happening. It's being set up, but right now our focus is in the city of Ridgecrest due to the mass population here.
We're getting word that there may be an evacuation out of Trona, where we were on our way.
Let's hold off on that for one moment. The chief of the Ridgecrest Police Department has something that you'd like to interject here real quick.
Yeah, as far as resources go for on the law enforcement side, we were already staffed. We had a large presence already with the Kern County Sheriff's Department and California City PD. They were here, so we were at a level that we felt comfortable with. And however, when the quake happened, Bakersfield PD immediately sent a team, as well as California City sent additional officers, and then the Kern County Sheriff's Department, they had a wave come in as well. So law enforcement wise, we're sufficient right now, and now it's preparing for the future. So what was your other question?
Of a pneumonia leak, we're hearing in KTLA that there may be an ammonia leak near Trona from some people who were in contact with there. They say they've been evacuated. They're on the side of the road, and there may be an ammonia leak.
I have not heard that yet. So your information is probably more updated than mine.
We heard there was a mobile home park fire earlier. What kind of damage was done fire-wise from the quake?
I have not been out there. Okay. Mick has been out there.
So we have a question about the actual specifics of damage that may have occurred in one of the residential areas here in Ridgecrest. To speak on that, we'll have the chief, battalion chief from Kern County.
Yes, ma'am. So as far as the structure fire that we actually had units that were en route to a hazardous condition, but one of our company officers reported a heavy smoke column. They diverted to that. We had a working fire. They got in it quickly. Normally we're looking at a 5-engine response, but due to the nature of the mass calls we had going on, we actually diverted 2 engines to it. Had units on scene, aggressive fire attack on it, got knocked on it quickly. We were able to confirm that people inside were okay. We had all accounted for. There was no injuries. They were able to protect exposures right by it as well. So as a result, they kept it to the building of origin. And that was the same case with the other secondary structure as well. Due to the abundance of calls, we were only able to cut loose a couple entities, engines to go towards that. Those guys were aggressive, same kind of tactics, protecting exposure, but they were also effective, and they held to the building of origin. So both instances with structural fires, it was damage was held to the building of origin. No reported injuries, a civilian or fire side.
What about the base? Are there any?
So we have a question about the base, and we don't have a representative here from the base, so we wouldn't be able to speak on actually what's occurring on the base. At this time, though, we are going to conclude the press conference. All the individuals here will be available for one-on-one breakouts, so feel free to go ahead and speak to them on whatever individual questions you may have. At this point, we don't have another exact time plan for the next press conference, but we will notify through social media. We will let out a press release as soon as we identify when the next press conference will be held. Thank you for your time.
So we have just heard from officials from both the state and from Kern County talking about the response and their different responses to it. Some things of note. A call has gone out to the President of the United States asking for an emergency declaration. Governor Gavin Newsom making that request. We don't know yet what the President's response has been, although we do know that FEMA has been activated in Northern California, and their office is responding to this emergency.
Okay. And we're going to check in now with reporter Corey James from our sister station KFSN in Fresno. Corey, what can you share with us?
And Mark and Giovanna, we're at the Everridge Market here in Ridgecrest. You can see some of the damage that was left behind from that massive tornado that happened this evening, a 7.1. Take a look at this. This is wine bottles all laid out across this aisle here. Most of them on the shelf. You can see where some of them were, and now you can see where they're collapsed after that earthquake took place this evening. Now, we want to tell you, we were here earlier this morning when they had gotten most of this facility, this building, cleaned up from Thursday's earthquake, and now they're dealing with this all over again. And this continues aisle down the aisle. I mean, take a look at the next aisle over here, Harrison. If you can move over to your right there, you can see cleaning supplies that also collapsed from shelves here. The employees who are working in this particular convenience store, they tell us they spent all day Thursday trying to get the store back up, trying to get it up in operation so that they can start selling things to their customers again. And then they're dealing with this just one day after that earthquake took place. And as we move a little bit farther down, you can see some other areas. You've got Coke bottles that also collapse. You've got food, some cans that collapse as well, paper towels, just different things, just giving you an idea of how intense that earthquake was this evening. We spoke with a number of people who were out here, some of them getting gas from the gas station because they're not sure if they're going to have to leave town this evening if something else hits, another earthquake takes place. They just want to be prepared. And you heard the chief there in that press conference just saying to folks, just make sure you are prepared to take care of yourself. That is what we've been seeing from a lot of folks who have been trying to come to this convenience store. They've been standing outside. The owners, they don't want folks in here just for safety reasons, as you can imagine, but they've been going to the door, collecting money, taking people's orders, if you will, of what they want from the store, cashing them out at the register, giving them their change, and then giving them that merchandise to leave. But this just gives you another idea of how intense this earthquake was. I mean, again, you can see just wine bottles, it looks like alcohol, glass everywhere. The smell, too, if you can imagine a concoction of different alcohols and wine all mixed together. It's been lingering. The aroma is something that you could smell before you even step inside the building. But this is what we're seeing here at Everridge Market. And as you can see, it created a lot of damage, a lot of mess. They dealt with this just a couple days ago. One of the employees told me, he said, you know, they didn't have earthquake insurance, so they were just hoping just to be able to recoup, start their operation again today, hopefully make some money, and then within a few hours of being open, here they are again dealing with this once more. And people that we've spoken with here in the town, they said that this earthquake obviously a lot more intense than the last one that happened on Thursday. Many of them feeling those aftershocks. We felt probably about 3 or 4 since it happened this evening. But again, as you can see, it has created quite a mess here at this convenience store. Mark, Giovanna.
All right, Corey, James, thank you for that update there from Ridgecrest. City officials there telling us that there had been 2 structure fires in that city that warranted a response from the fire department, a quick response, albeit. And we are here. We understand we have one of our photographers, Martin Orozco, who has arrived at the scene of apparently one of those fires, a burned out structure there. Let's take a look, Giovanna.
Yeah, this home, we believe, is on the 1400 block of Wayne. Again, that's in Ridgecrest, and we believe this is one of the 2 homes that we heard from firefighters earlier that they had to attack. And the good news is that they were able to fight, get those flames under control fairly quickly, and there were no reports of any injuries, and that they were able to keep those fires contained to the original source, the original home, and the flames did not spread.
And you're seeing an emergency vehicle there. That's a police or sheriff's department vehicle cruising by. The presence there is very high. The chief of the sheriff's department there saying, in effect, they have a lot of resources in there now. They are keeping an eye on everything. But daylight is going to reveal a lot.
That is the challenge. Right now, they don't. They talked about situational awareness. They don't have that at this point because it is dark. Mm-hmm. So they don't know the extent of the damage. They don't know the extent of what is required to help these folks. But we did hear from, was it Mayor Beeden, also that the folks in Ridgecrest, Breeden, are sleeping outdoors. tonight.
A lot of folks sleeping outdoors, and that is certainly something that happens fairly frequently in the wake of a large earthquake like this, no matter what community. In Mexico City it happened back in the 90s, and you know, just pretty much you can name the city that it takes place. People are kind of not trusting necessarily of the structures in which they sleep after dealing with a situation like this. But
certainly not after several quakes.
Right.
Now.
Two big
days,
ones in 2 days. Okay, from San Bernardino County Fire, Jeremy Kern, a captain, is joining us now on the phone. Are you with us, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you give us an update from your standpoint?
So right now we have resources deployed out to the Trona region. We have firefighters and specialized trained personnel who are going to be going out to the region and for damage after this latest event.
What have you been able to determine thus far about the extent of damage in Trona?
So we do have a significant damage after this latest quake. A lot of the highways, and I believe you have some photos that have been circulated widely right now through the news, of the main sections of road that have buckled near the railroad tracks, and there's been a closure that's been established by Caltrans District 9, I believe.
And you're referring to Highway 178?
Correct.
Okay. Have you been there yourself? And can you tell us, are there building collapses? Have homes been affected? Are people injured? What have you seen, if you've had the opportunity?
So initially, when this initially happened, our firefighters locally who live in the community, they went out at immediate hazard assessment. It's a very tight community, it's a smaller community, about 2,000 people. So they know where their target hazards are, the elderly population. They immediately went to those areas. And as 911 calls come in, they try to triage out gas leaks, reports of fire, or any as far as power related. They did lose power to the region within Trona, so that obviously will complicate efforts as well. Now that we're at nighttime, it's going to slow our progress. As daylight hits, we'll be able to ascertain exactly what type of damage we're at. But we do have increased damage. What the earthquake was prior, we have a lot more block walls set up, buildings which are cracking their foundation, tipped off their mobile homes.
Do you have any numbers on the number of people who have been perhaps transported to a hospital or that required assistance, medical assistance?
So at this point, there's no reports of any ambulance transports to people that have been directly affected or injured from the quake itself. Of course, the calls for service still come in. We have ambulances who have been shipped out to that region, and they are handling the normal day-to-day calls when people call for shortness of breath or chest pain or anything like that. But nobody's been transported. We've treated people in the field for minor cuts related to broken glass and things of that nature during the quake itself, but nobody's been transported at this point.
All right. It's encouraging to hear, talking about calls for service, the 911 system is still up and functioning, right? The phone system, the system by which people can call for help is still working, correct?
Correct. At this point, we don't seem to have any issues as far as that goes, but we do advise people that they assess the situation and conditions in their home. If they have an immediate hazard, like I talked about earlier, the gas, the smell of gas, fire, of course, if they need medical attention or treatment, if they have a power line issue or lines down. Those are something that we want people to call 911 for. We'll triage through our resources who are out there in the field, and we'll get the firefighters to their homes to take care of that, and the appropriate agency there to mitigate that hazard.
So what is your plan for the next several hours? Will resources be out on the street working through the night?
That's correct. So at this point, we have logistics headed out there, and actually have been headed out that way all throughout the day. That being fuel for emergency equipment, pallets of water, and any other Gatorade and food. We've been working with the Red Cross to facilitate needs of the community members as well. Throughout the night, what we have is we have our specialized firefighters who are trained in urban search and rescue, structured triage, search techniques, emergency building shoring. So if the need arises and they find homes and there's a potential for a trapped victim, they have specialized equipment and training. They can deal with those situations as they come up.
Is the damage to Highway 178 affecting your ability to respond to this emergency?
No, not at this point. We've still been able to take access in our emergency personnel resources and able to get out of
I have a question. You mentioned the Red Cross and possible shelters that are open. Are people using the shelters?
So as far as, I don't have any information on the shelter, but the Red Cross is there today, and they're getting in. So when team members in, Red Cross that go need to find where they need to go, whether shelter, place to go, or whether it's water, food, or things of those, the comforts where people may not just take to their home.
All right. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us. We apologize to our viewers and our listeners for the kind of the spotty nature of the
Cell
transmission.
phones.
But we felt it was vital to try to get as much information as we could.
Yeah.
We're going to have we have crews on their way heading into Trona. We're going to have more information from there. And Rob McMillan right now is in the city of Ridgecrest. We got an update from there, from officials there. Rob, you're on the ground. What can you tell us from where you are?
Well, let's just take a deep breath. I rolled right into town literally 2 minutes ago. My photographer, Martin Orozco, got here before me and found this home behind me. We're here on the 1400 block of Wayne Street, and we really don't know much about exactly what happened here, except that obviously there was a large fire at this home, and the fire has been extinguished, but this home, which looks like a mobile home, looks to be a complete loss. From the news conference that we were listening to from Kern County officials within the past 20 minutes, we heard from the fire department that there were 2 confirmed structure fires here in Ridgecrest at this point. Fire crews were able to get to both locations and put both fires out. Again, 2 reports of structure fires. As far as damage goes, and that's one thing that obviously a lot of people who saw the damage up here in Ridgecrest from the earthquake yesterday, the magnitude 6.4 earthquake yesterday, most of the damage from that quake seemed to be just property damage and not a whole lot of structure damage. One would expect this quake being a magnitude 7.1. You heard Dr. Lucy Jones say it. Sounds about 8 times greater than that 4th of July earthquake. One would surmise that there would be much more property damage and much more structural damage from that quake in this one. From what we can tell you right now, we haven't seen it yet. Of course, it's pitch black right now. From driving into Ridgecrest from the south, you get into town, and this is what I just experienced, and it looks much like you'd expect any city of this size, 25,000+ people, to be on a Friday night after midnight. Not too many people around. What activity we saw was at a gas station. The gas station was open for business, and there were quite a few people there gassing up, but not any long lines. As I progressed into town, all of a sudden it went to pitch black because, as we've been hearing and as we can now confirm, there are widespread pockets throughout Ridgecrest where the power is out. Martin, if you want to just pan that way, and you're not going to be able to see much, but that's because the power's out. Pitch black. There goes a guy in a truck right there. This one of many parts of this town experiencing a power outage tonight. I had text messaged someone who I spoke with at the Walmart parking lot yesterday, and he was freaked out by yesterday's earthquake, as you might imagine, even more so with the earthquake about 3 hours ago. He says, and the mayor confirmed this in that news conference we were listening to a short time ago, a lot of people are just too scared to be inside right now. They've had all of this shaking over and over and over again, and so they've made the decision to spend the night outside. I was speaking with one transportation official on the way up here, and from what that person told me, some of these streets, it almost seemed like a block party. Obviously, there's nothing fun about what's going on right now, but so many people camping outside. On this street, I really can't report that. We don't see anything here. In fact, it feels like we're all by ourselves. All I can hear right now off in the distance is sirens of emergency vehicles going here and there. Anecdotally, as I was driving up, I stopped at one of the gas stations to fill up because you never can tell when there is a small chance of an even larger earthquake, and obviously you're concerned about gasoline and some of those resources. I was talking to a cashier, and he saw the logo and says, "Are you coming or going or going back. And he said that there were at least 30 people in just about an hour span that he says were leaving Ridgecrest. They were heading out of here. They've just had too much of this shaking. They've had enough of it, and they're just going to leave and get to a place where they consider to be safer. It is also very interesting, and there are so many stories right now through the greater Southern California area of people hearing the creaking sounds and feeling the earthquake. And I was just talking with the pastor at my church saying, in Orange County area, it was really rocking and rolling, and there was something that was about to fall off the shelf. I was in Riverside, and we didn't feel a thing. But again, be that as it may, there are two different sides of this whole equation. You can watch all of the scientists look at this from a very antiseptic and very scientific point of view and try to explain what the ground is doing and how we really, can't tell too much or put it into too much perspective, because this has been going on for millions of years and we only have a small part to look at it. They can look at it from that point of view. But here in Ridgecrest, there's also the psychologic factor that's going on here. Again, these people are frightened. And, if yesterday's earthquake, or I guess now it's 2 days ago, the 4th of July earthquake was a large earthquake, this is a very large earthquake. We haven't felt an earthquake like this in decades. And people here are quite fearful. But from the information we've gathered so far, and again, we'll get much more when the sun comes up and, a lot of the first responders and emergency officials can survey the damage and see what it really looks like. I would have to say it sounds like, because only minor injuries reported and only 2 structure fires so far, given the fact that this earthquake was 8 times stronger, it would look like Ridgecrest has dodged another bullet. Back to you for now.
All right. Thank you for that report. Thank you. And thanks for joining us for Eyewitness News, continuing coverage of the 7.1 earthquake and the many, 100 aftershocks. Be sure to tune in to Eyewitness News starting at 5 a.m. with live updates from Ridgecrest as the sun comes up.
We'll be standing by throughout the night on ABC7 and ABC7.com to bring you any updates as they happen. You can expect more shaking. Stay calm. It should calm down as time progresses. We're all in this together. For the entire Eyewitness News team, we thank you very much for watching.
Good night.